So good evening, everyone. I want to first say, for people who are in the back, there are seats over here, so please come on in and wind your way through this to the back area here. There's plenty of seats back behind the screen. You have to come forward for the video. So welcome, everyone. It's good to have you here for the 2013 third annual Judith Davidson Moyers Women of Spirit lecture at Union Theological Seminary. It is such a joy to say the third annual. This, they say in your liturgy classes, is now officially a tradition. It's a delight to have you here. I see many students, faculty, trustees, friends of Union. I see some of you who are friends who have now gotten used to this tradition and are coming back to hear this lecture now year after year. Get ready for the one coming up next year. Also see some new friends. Welcome to this place. Make yourself at home. Union is a very informal community. Following our lecture today, we'll be having a reception in the social hall, which is just out the door and down the stairs, over to your left. Tomorrow, we'll also be having a worship service in our noon chapel with Sister Simone, and you're welcome to join us for a gathering in this place that does what this place is designed to do. It's a worship service, a communion event. I also want to encourage you to pick up the card that's on your seat, and if you have a question that you would like to have asked at the end, write it out, and we'll be collecting those for the part of our gathering that is open for conversation. Before they leave, I also want to thank our musicians, Chanda Rule. Chanda is a first-year MDiv student here, and her whole group just really, Ike Strum, Gerd Brandroyd, and Sebastian Noel, thank you for your work. Thank you, thank you. I also want to just take a moment to introduce the chairman of Union's board, Dick Dunham, who is with us. Dick. And a very special calling out, I might say. We didn't just do this in honor of Sister Simone being here, but it is something that honors her being here in a very special way. On July 1st of 2013, Union will open its dean's door to the first Roman Catholic sister who is going to be the head of our academic life here, Dr. Mary Boyce, Sister of the Holy Names. Lots of things happen here that our founders could not have imagined, and this is a big one. Of all of the introductions that I do in the course of a year, this is the one that I take the absolute most delight in. And that is for a simple reason, and it is this, that I believe that what happens in this conversation, honoring and celebrating and moving forward the work of women of spirit in the world, is the hope of the world. It's a simple truth. This lecture was formed 3 years ago through a very generous endowment made by Bill Moyers and friends in honor of Judith and her legacy and work. And it could have been a lecture that did all manner of things that happen at Union. But no, Judith saw from the start with this kind of crystalline clarity that what was needed and what wasn't happening elsewhere was a lectureship that gave a platform for women who were global leaders, who had affected significant change in the world. Now, we have platforms for women like that, but we needed one for women here that did something also different, that brought them here because that work was motivated by their faith, their deep faith, the wellspring that drove them to it. Women of spirit. And it's that combination that we honor here tonight. Another simple truth, the vast majority of the religious people in the world are women. The vast majority of the religious communities they belong to do not honor their leadership directly, but the vast majority of the political and social and everyday actors who take care of our lives and move this world forward are those women of faith. So what we're doing here, which seems in small something, is honoring, I like to think of it as a sacrament, a concentrated version of a truth about the world. It's been very fun at Union to get ready for Sister Simone to come. We have had our own series. We've been talking to students about what's on their bus, who's on their bus, where is their bus going, what's the fire in their bus, what's fueling it. We've had a great time with that. And it is a delight this evening to introduce Sister Simone, to invite to the podium the woman that this lectureship is named after, the woman who, in my mind, is sort of the ultimate bus driver. And for those of you who know Judith, that makes perfect sense. Judith is a person of capacious capacity and intellect, a person with focus and determination, a person who across the years has been able to read the map of this country and see and determine places and directions that things need to move when that map was not obvious to others. She's a person of enormous energy. And what this lectureship allows us to highlight is for Judith Moyers, in that sacramental way, it is concentrated in the depths of a spirituality that is boundless and on fire. It's wonderful to have Bill Moyers with us this evening, and John Moyers. Thank you both for being here. And I'd like to invite Judith to come forward and introduce our speaker. Oh, great woman of spirit.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Sister Simone is the perfect example of women of spirit. These are the women who face the forces of great power with amazing courage and inspiring spirit, while also standing on their spiritual foundation. Tonight, we welcome Sister Simone Campbell of the Order of the Sisters of Social Service, who is Executive Director of Network, the Catholic Social Justice Lobby in Washington. Do not condemn all lobbyists. We first learned about her last fall when the news media picked up on the story of Sister Simone and the nuns on the bus. It was irresistible. Bill and I sent our producer, Andy Fredericks, to document just what was going on out there in America. In order to really introduce her, I must show you this short video of Sister Simone at work. So fasten your seatbelts. We're going for a little ride.
Faith is like walking through a mist with your eyes wide open. Reminds me of when I was a kid in Long Beach and we'd stand out at the bus stop in the fog and we tried to tell by the headlights, was it a bus or was it a truck? You know, what was it? For me, looking down the road, I don't know. I don't have a clue. I just know this step is the right step.
So it was that on a steamy morning earlier this summer, Sister Simone Campbell and a handful of other nuns gathered in Des Moines, Iowa, to set out on a journey of faith and politics. Simone belongs to the Order of the Sisters of Social Service. She's also an attorney who heads the Catholic Social Justice Lobby Network based in Washington, D.C.
Will we move beyond individualism back to the principles of our founding fathers and mothers, I'd add, to be we the people of the United States?
She found herself in a bit of hot holy water when the Vatican singled out Network for not promoting all the Church's doctrines with equal verve. Suddenly, the nuns were in the news.
The Vatican chastised the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, America's largest group of Catholic nuns, for caring too much about the very poor and not spending enough time crusading against abortion and same-sex marriage.
This small group of nuns in the Catholic Church is going feminist. And the Vatican is obviously, well, a figure of speech, slapping them down.
Is this a group of radical feminists teaching outside the doctrines of the Church?
Oh, heavens, no. That's just ridiculous. We work every day to live as Jesus did in relationship with people at the margins of our society. That's all we do.
Okay. That's a cheap applause line, Jesus. You can throw Jesus into anything and people are going to applaud.
Sister Simone seized on her unexpected celebrity, and with the support of thousands of individual donors and a sympathetic labor union, she and 4 of her sisters in arms took to the road. From Des Moines to D.C., they would ride in solidarity with the poorest among us.
Network's mission from its beginning is about economic justice issues. We were founded 40 years ago by 47 Catholic sisters to be the voice for and with those at the margins of society all over the country. And the thing that is upmost in our mind at Network is the devastation that is being done economically through the budget fight and what will happen to programs that are so effective, that really help people. And so it seemed like a great convergence to have this notoriety used for the sake of our mission.
We know that the House-passed Ryan budget will devastate our nation. And most people don't know what's going on. And that's why we decided to take to the road in our rather glorious bus.
The primary message of their mission was to sound an alarm about the federal budget recently passed by the Republican majority in the House. A budget titled The Path to Prosperity by its author, Republican Congressman Paul Ryan.
What we're doing is we're trying to let people know that the Ryan budget cuts social services, devastates social services, cuts food stamps, and while they're cutting all the social services, well, what are they going to do with the money? They want you to think that they're giving it to the deficit, but they're not. What they're doing is they're cutting taxes for the wealthy.
3 hours northeast of Des Moines, after stops in Ames and Cedar Rapids, the nuns came to the river town of Dubuque, where they visited a food pantry run by the Sisters of the Presentation, a charity already burdened by need, which would surely feel the weight of Ryan's intended cuts to the food stamp program.
And we usually get anywhere from 15 to maybe 20,000 pounds of food at that time.
Sister Lynn Wagner is the pantry's director.
We have the elderly who can't make it on their Social Security payments or pension payments that they have. We have single parent families. We have 2-parent families. We have kids out of college that can't get a job that pays enough for them to pay the rent and all that. A lot of jobs are minimum wage, basic pay, and that just doesn't cut it anymore when groceries go up and, when milk is $2 for a half gallon or something like that. It's just, people can't make it.
Traveling east from Dubuque, the nuns crossed the Mississippi, heading for the Lion's Den, Paul Ryan's home district in Wisconsin. They arrived at the congressman's office in Janesville to a hero's welcome.
When I was in Catholic school, nuns weren't my heroes, and I never thought I'd see the day where I forgave them and they were my total heroes, and that's what's happening.
This is really a courageous move on their parts, and the fact that they're standing up for social justice, that's what they're talking about here. Social justice for everybody. That is a major, courageous thing that they are doing.
This is Sister Marge Clark.
Paul Ryan was still in Washington, where Congress remained in session, so the nuns were left to meet with his staff.
I want to talk to Paul Ryan. I want to understand what he sees, learn from that, and see if there's a way that we can be more effective that we can claim our culture back, that we can claim our government back, that we can govern not for stalemate or political points, but we can solve the problems, the serious problems of this 21st century. And talking to people who think differently when I can keep my patience is a really good way to do that.
The meeting was cordial, and the confrontation the press would have loved to see never came to pass.
What we're here is to lift up a different point of view and say, let's talk.
It's we the people. It's not we the politicians or we the rich people or we Citizens United. It's we the people. And we're losing our democracy.
Here in Janesville, the nuns on the bus have made one of many stops that they plan to take as they travel across the country to spread their religious beliefs and politics.
From Janesville, the nuns carried their message across Wisconsin, then south into the land of Lincoln.
The issue isn't that the people at the top are bad. The issue is not that this is class warfare. The issue is that we are all better when we all share.
They called out and called on congressmen who voted for the Ryan Plan,
We're the nuns on the bus.
while promoting their own faithful budget.
That was created by the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish communities coming together.
A fiscal plan, they say, is more in line with the values of a just nation. Everywhere they went, a crowd was there to greet them. Catholics and non-Catholics alike gathered to bless the nuns' journey.
When we get off the bus and people see us and they've got signs of support, that is just absolutely an incredible connection.
Sister Diane Donahue calls herself a persistent activist, and she's proved it by walking alongside the poor for the better part of 60 years, from India to East LA.
Jesus talks about feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, healing the sick. So it isn't like we've invented something in the last 150 years. We go back to the teachings of Jesus. We are the church, the people of God. And so when you talk church, you're talking about people coming together in a faithful response and looking at and responding to the signs of the times. And our signs of the times right now is that the people at the top who have the loudest voice and the most money have an incredible amount of influence in terms of priorities. For people at the top to have a tax break is just totally unjust. People at the bottom need the revenue for services that really count.
The bus rolled on, from Illinois to Indiana, then into Michigan and Ohio. The nuns on the bus were welcomed as messengers of good news, like the evangels of old. Everywhere they went, they visited the places where other women of faith are the few among the desperate many.
We pray for the...
We are called to be a bush that allows God to flame up and be a burning bush.
Over and again, Sister Simone invoked the imagery of the Bible, stories of how faith can resurrect withered lives, despairing souls, and broken bodies.
What it does is it says that God has heard the cry of the people.
From Ohio, their journey took them east through Pennsylvania, with stops in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Hershey, and Philadelphia. Then south into Maryland and Virginia. They stopped to visit with farmers who grow produce destined for local food pantries, and celebrated Mass with a congregation of immigrants in Richmond. Finally, 14 days and some 3,000 miles after they left Des Moines, the nuns on the bus pulled into the nation's capital.
Nuns in the bus,
speak for not just Catholics, not for Christians only, not for Jews. They speak for all of us.
As great and educational as this trip was, as inspirational as this trip was, it was also a journey of heartbreak and anguish, and it was a journey of hope. For me, this trip has been totally about touching the pain of the world is real for all these people we've seen and being hopeful. We have hope that the pain of the world isn't the end of the story. And that frees our imagination to think of our world in a new place. To think of this place between the partisan politics to a center. To think of a church where everyone could be cared for. To think of a lobby like ours where we could really be voices for the folks who are at the margins. It frees up our imagination. The bus trip was a prophetic imagination, it turns out. And who knew it? It's fabulous.
So that's not all of the story, you know. That's just one little adventure from this group. And what we're about to hear now is what you're up to next. Sister Simone Campbell.
Well, you saw the best part. So if nothing else, that film is fabulous. Andy did a great job. It was amazing. And it put me back to last summer. And what you cannot tell from the film is it was hot. And we kept wearing those jackets because we had pockets, and people kept giving us stuff. And so we needed pockets, and none of our skirts had pockets, so we kept wearing jackets. Oh, it was incredible. But anyway, enough of that. It is such an honor to be able to reflect and to share with you all a bit about this intersection of spirituality and activism. Because I know that too often us activists have a tendency to poo-poo spiritual stuff, because my heavens, we have to actually do something. Or the spiritual side poo-poos activism because we're not grounded or rooted enough in what matters. And what I know is that for me, they're integrated. It's a seamless garment that needs to be worn at all times. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit of my own story, a little bit about what we've encountered on the bus and at other places, and then to, as Judith invites me to, share a little bit about coming attractions to see what's happening down the road. Peering into that foggy mist, what do we see? Well, I am a Californian, and it's hard to express what it means to be from California, but are there any other Californians in here? Praise God, thank you, thank you. My people, I love it. I was born in Santa Monica, grew up in Long Beach, which is Southern California, and but somehow my sister, who was a year and a half younger than I, and I were passionately concerned as kids about civil rights. And I really think it was probably our teachers, our parents, I don't know, but also I think it was Dr. Martin Luther King who integrated for us faith and action. And for me, civil rights was always about the gospel. I could not see how anyone could read the gospel as a kid and not welcome everybody into school. And I remember vividly as a young kid seeing, those of us that are old enough, many of us are old enough to remember this, but to see the African American kids escorted by the National Guard, to me was horrifying that that was happening in my country, and that people of faith thought it was okay. For me, the gospel always was about welcoming everyone. And so, as I grew up and joined the community, I joined the community because of civil rights. And what I discovered on a sit-in as a freshman in college, we were sitting in at the Los Angeles Board of Education, and I discovered that I was doing this not just because of wanting to integrate and improve the Los Angeles public schools. Rather, I was doing it because of the gospel. And I hungered to do that sort of movement work with people who shared the reason as well as the goal. And so, to me, to join the Sisters of Social Service, who, I mean, you can tell by our title is that it's, you know, a bit of troublemakers. And our foundress was, we were founded in Hungary, in Budapest in 1923. And our foundress was the first woman in parliament. And our sisters in Europe organized the women's suffrage movement. And we've always been political. But as an immigrant community to the United States, we had to be a little more careful. And so, but it was that political imagination that was released for all of us, I think. So that after I took final vows, I went to law school. I went to the University of California at Davis, and there I say I entered my rabid feminist phase. Those of you that are doing women's studies may have read Mary Daly's Church in the Second Sex. Ooh. Or some of us who came to that rabid feminist phase. I made the mistake of reading it on retreat. And it unleashed the fire for me in a way that was a wildfire. It was totally uncontained, and I, quite frankly, was not very fit for human habitation for a very long period of time. Because, I'll just tell you one story. There was this priest, and you know, as a Catholic, we only have men in this ministerial role. And this fairly young priest came to celebrate with our sisters, celebrating their Golden Jubilee. 50 years of living this life. And he proceeds in a very arrogant way to make it all about him and vesting. He had them come up and help put his vestments on. It was just, and I was my Tawanda the Magnificent, you know, if you know that. So that when I approached him in the sacristy after liturgy, I did not use my inside voice. And discovered that all my sisters sitting out in chapel were privy to my conversation. Oh dear, community is a wonderful thing. It's good for humility. But it led me to know a sense of power, a sense of authority, a sense of integrated passion for the gospel. And once again, for me, the role of women was all about the gospel. So that eventually led me to a Zen practice. I got introduced to Zen by a German Benedictine who'd become a Zen Roshi in Japan. And he was in California. Now, isn't that a story? And I worried in the beginning that for me, a Zen practice spoke to my heart in a way that was, like coming home. I expressed it like, you know, jumping off the diving board into this cool water of refreshment. It was glorious. And then I got worried. You know, a lot of Zen people are really kind of passive. Well, what's going to happen to me? Am I just going to become passive? I could become really lethargic or something. Well, 30 years later, I could say no worries about that. But what happened for me was this became the ground of my spirituality, a ground of sinking roots deep into God's presence alive in the world and coming to treasure that we indeed are one body. And it led me eventually to liberation theology, which I loved. It was fabulous. The identification with the global South, my oppression as a woman, I was still in my rabid phase maybe, and it excited my heart in a way to claim liberation. It's glorious, those of you that have studied it. It's fantastic. But then I realized that I, as a woman of the first world, really could not claim liberation as my theology because it was not my experience of oppression in that way. And I came to reflect on, if that's the third world South expression, what is the theology that we in this first world are called to embrace, to explore, to create? Because what I realized is that the South needed a liberation because of our colonial oppression. So it was arrogant of me to assume this position of liberation. And what it led me to was I sat for a very long time with the question, so what is it for us? What is it for us in the first world? And I came to know that I think what we're being called to is to develop a theology of insecurity. That we are called in the United States to let go of our obsession with security and to embrace the mystery of the Spirit alive among us that creates all those unknown surprises. And so for the last, 25 years, 30 years, I don't know, time flies when you're having fun, so it's hard to know just how long it's been. I've worked at embracing insecurity as being the way forward. And it makes me laugh, because we've got Plan B, we've got contingency plans, you have an emergency slush fund, you've got backup notes, you have all this other stuff. How much time do we spend being secure? We have a nation that controls resources and creates war because we want to make sure that our oil dependence continues. We've got fracking, and we can get off all in these policy debates, but see how all of these policy debates then become around our security and the fact that we think we're special and that we are entitled to claim what we want. And so for me, I think if we embraced a theology of insecurity, maybe the rest of the world wouldn't need a liberation theology. And what I came to was this sense of trying to find a way through a wilderness. And I wanted to share with you a poem that I wrote actually after I came to this a while after I came to this insight. You have to know I'm sort of a puppy poet. I'm still kind of a beginner poet. But this poem I actually wrote after coming back, on the way back from Iraq. I went to Iraq, to Baghdad and Basra in 2002, before the invasion, on a small peace delegation. It was just this amazing thing, and two of the poems I'm going to use tonight are from that place. But on the way back, driving from Baghdad to Amman, Jordan in a taxi, that was among the odd things that we did. But anyway, we got caught in a sandstorm. And this sandstorm is terrifying. Have any of you been in sandstorms? Anybody here? Oh, yeah. It's awful. You're on a highway, and you have to keep going. And you can't see, and then the sand gets in the car, and people started sneezing. And then our driver hands a small roll of Scotch tape to Rick in the passenger seat and says, keep an eye on the windshield, and if you see a crack forming, put Scotch tape on it. I have no idea if that would have worked. But he told us that the window he had the experience of the front windshield imploding. So all eyes were riveted on that front windshield. Praise God, they were riveted someplace because we were terrified. And then it went on forever. It got dark and light and dark and light and dark and light and dark and light. And then we encountered like a 5-inch band of rain. and we were instantly in desert clear. And this is the poem that comes, and I think it talks about our nation and our situation. And it goes like this. It's called Compassion's Path. We walk a sandstorm of impotence, the isolated dread, the demons of our day. We walk a sandstorm of half-truths, lies of ochre, beige, tan, sepia confusion, pelted, buffeted by winds of war. We walk a sandstorm of drifting, elusive truth, wandering ways, and blind following. We walk a sandstorm eroded by demanding doubt, overwhelmed by the horror swirling round, invading lungs and lives. We walk a sandstorm of promised grief, aching temptation to hunker down and hide until a more propitious time. But in this time of alluring weakness, in this time of fearful groaning, cold, blind logic, anger rising, remember the clear-eyed anchor of our resolve. Remember the eyes of Mayada, Sarah, Rita, Asan, Abdullah, Makbula, and many more. We may be blinded in the outward journey, but remember this inner core. May the eyes of family, terrors of family, set fire to our impotence, stoke our resolve, melt the cold stone of our hearts to yield to tears. For like rain, tears shed, settle sandstorms. Like rain, tears shed, clear the air. Like rain, tears shed, reveal the path. So let us weep. Let us embody healing tears. Let us be copious tears to settle our country's storms. It's our country's storms, I think, that are creating much havoc and trying to see beyond what I describe as the wallpaper of our country, what we just take as given, to see with a more penetrating eye, for me, requires that contemplative practice of listening deeply. In the 1990s, I got a window onto our culture because I didn't know that the U.S. had a culture. If any of you had that thought, what are we? We're just kind of like, we're just a conglomeration. But I went to be with our sisters in Central Europe soon after the wall came down. And our sisters came out of a socialist culture. And our sisters had centralized planning. They centrally planned my visit. And they took me literally by the hand every place. Every place. They took me by the hand through the art museum. They took me by the hand and put me on a bus with an English-speaking tour guide, introduced me to the driver, introduced me to the tour guide, sat me in the seat, waved goodbye, stood on the curb, waved me off. I felt like a kid going off to school. I come back and they're back. I come back on the bus from the tour, and they're there, and they come on the bus. They didn't let me get off by myself. And they took my hand, and then they took me to various places, and they got me ice cream, and they did a variety of other things. But they had it all planned, and it was driving me nuts. And I came to know that in a culture in a democratic culture, we value our independence. And so I finally said to them, there was a group of younger sisters who were having a class, and I was supposed to help give them a class. And I said, well, do you help plan the class? They said, oh no, that's Sister Irene's job. Well, I can't imagine our young sisters not being engaged in this process of what they want to learn and what their questions are and where are they going. Oh no, they took careful notes. And then I came to know I was supposed to speak about volunteers and how to work with volunteers. And so I do this lovely workshop on volunteerism and working with volunteers. And those of you that are preparing for ministry know all about this. And then at the end, there was one last question. And so I called on the sister. I mean, we were only like 15, but everybody raised their hand. And she said, excuse me, sister, why would anyone volunteer? It would take someone's job away if they volunteer. And I realized in a centrally planned economy, everything is allocated, everything is doled out, everything is apportioned. And then they said, well, what, it's not like this for you. And I go, no. If no one volunteered, nothing would ever get done in the church, right? If no one volunteered, how would we ever get anything accomplished? And then I started thinking about hospitality, and I told them what hospitality would be in the United States. If you come to my house, I'll give you a key, I'll embrace you, I'll give you maps and options and choices and all these possibilities. And then I'll let you decide. And I'll go with you if you want, but if you want some time alone, that's cool too. I'll tell you how to get back to my house, and here's my cell phone number, and I'll help find you if you get lost. And their question to that was, well, how would we know that you care? Oh, it's because I gave you a key to my house. And I realized in our culture of wealth, of individualism, of the freedom to move and to choose and to have so many options, we don't even realize the culture that we've created of being individuals. And then my heart got led to this worry, to this amazing worry that we are on this edge of being called to something more, that we've journeyed so far out in individualism that we need something more. And Shannon, I need you to hand me my bag because I didn't bring a poem. We need this poem. Thank you. Oh, you also have to see the bag. But what I realized was that the hunger in our nation is because we don't know we're connected to each other, and we are too fearful about losing control. I'm losing control, all right. Can't find my poem. Uh-oh. All right. Well, it's assigned, and I was not supposed to do it. All right, you have to invite me back. Sorry, can't find my poem. I'll share it around. It's not there. I got to find it. So what we have to do then is to open our hearts to each other and to the Spirit alive within us in order to be a community that can make a difference. And so for me, this whole spirituality and activism is the same thing. They are not separate, but it's like breathing in and breathing out. It is one movement with two little parts. And so what I have come to know is that it comes in a little flash of insight that you got to pay attention to. Or it comes in a conversation which is like sacred. Or one that is so annoying that I have to face the fact that it really made me angry. But it's that action that puts us in touch with each other. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about this Nuns on the Bus reality and how this amazing explosion of the Spirit is so far beyond any one of us. And so I've said that I lobby from a contemplative stance. Okay, I'm a registered lobbyist. Boo hiss, boo hiss. I love it. You know, I've got two strikes against me. I'm a lobbyist and I'm a lawyer, but I'm a Catholic sister. So does that balance out? I don't know. But the fact is that the reason we got named by the Vatican last April was because we were successful in helping to pass the Affordable Care Act. I mean, that was what happened. It's politics, it's not faith. It's politics. And the bishops, the Catholic bishops, had very bad political advice. And then they blamed us. But what happened was when the Affordable Care Act was up in Congress, and I won't go through all the complications, what came to me, we immediately stood with the Catholic Health Association to support them. And then I go off and I do my meditation. And what came to me in my very distracted meditation was, I'm thinking, what else can we do? What else can we do? Oh, hi, God, nice to see you. What else can we do? What else can we do? And what struck me, what came to me was, oh, do a sign-on letter. Oh, do a sign-on letter. We do sign-on letters all the time. That means it's a letter where you write, you say, we're in support of this because it really does good stuff, or really where you oppose it because it does bad stuff. We were in favor of it because it did good stuff, and I sent it around to Catholic sisters, leaders, to sign on. And I thought if we had 20 signers, we could go public. And it's a long, complicated story. I don't have time to tell you all the details, but I get back to the office after a red-eye flight from Los Angeles. I discovered we had 59 signers. 59 leaders of Catholic communities signed onto it. I was so proud of my sisters. It was so fabulous. But the key thing was that between the time the Catholic Health Association came out with their letter and the Wednesday where we came out with our letter, on that Monday, the bishops had come out opposing the bill because they said there was federal funding for abortion in the bill. The bill says there shall be no federal funding of abortion, and then it says there shall be an annual audit to ensure that there's no federal funding of abortion. But the bishop's staff didn't buy it. And finally, there's been two federal court, any lawyers here too? Yeah, some lawyers, I know. Anyway, 2 federal courts have found as a matter of law that there is no federal funding for abortion in the Affordable Care Act. And the bishops finally, last August, changed their website to say they fear that there's federal funding in abortion. So what I say to them is the scripture of this week, of Easter week, is fear not, fear not. Amen. Well, anyway, but see how meditation and action go together. They're the one movement. And so what happened was, on retreat in December in 2011, I was doing a Zen retreat, and I'd sat with this Catholic priest who's a Zen Roshi for a long time, many years, and Pat usually would let me drift. It was really nice. He'd let me drift. I'd always find something interesting. It would happen. But in December of 2011, he pushed me, which was like, got my spiritual back up, and he pushed me to engage radical acceptance. To radically accept the people that I think are mistakes of God. It's not easy. And I had a long list, including Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, Paul Ryan. Oh man, the list goes on. But I came to a really spiritual place that was really lovely, of radical acceptance, because what I came to know was, if I'm at odds with the God in them, I'm at odds with the God in me. I do not want to be separated from God. So I need to welcome them into me. Oh, isn't that a lovely spiritual thought? It's very hard, but I got to this spiritual place, and I had 3 more days of retreat left, so I thought, oh, I'm going to be holy for 3 days. It's going to be great. And then he added, as I go to tell him my great spiritual insights, he said, well, now add in fighting. Fighting? You mean like fighting, like hitting each other? He goes, yeah, like fighting. Isn't that what you do? Oh, yeah. But you didn't have to bring it up. I was in the spiritual place. And so I'm complaining, and he says, well, it's a good thing retreat's not over, and he sends me back to go meditate. Well, what happened for me is that when you sit with radical acceptance and fighting, the temptation for me was to see them as a dichotomy, as two separate things. But the fact is that they're a unity. And when they become a unity, my experience was fire. It's like the fire of Pentecost. It's like think about it. It's the solid, fuel, and it is the flame, the passion, and then it's the messy ash, and it's the searing heat, but it's the warm, inviting light, and it's so many things. It was like God alive in our midst. And so that's December of 2011. April 14th, a year ago, of 2012, we had our 40th anniversary for Network, our glorious organization, and the big question was, how do we let people know about our mission? How do we let people know that we advocate on Capitol Hill and we've been pushing back against the Ryan budget and that some bad stuff's happening? How do we let people know? On April 18th, the Vatican answered our prayer. You have to be very careful what you pray for. But really, seriously, look at it. So we at Network, we don't know. We don't know. What do? Do we send them a gift membership? A thank you note? But having eyes to see and radically accept even them is gift. This is all gift. And in my prayer has been, it kind of vacillates between help, help, and fear not, fear not. And what I came to know was that we needed help, and so we invited help from outside folks. And we brought folks in, and we did a whole bunch of good things, and there were all kinds of mysterious gifts that resulted. So that on May 14th, we had a meeting. Okay, the censure was April 18th. May 14th is this meeting that came up with this idea of a bus trip. And I said we couldn't go public until we had the money. And we had the money in 10 days. Oh, then guess we had to go on a bus trip. But in that time, what happened was that this sense of fire and the Spirit changed from being the fire of Pentecost to being what you saw in the video about the call to be the burning bush. Because I really think this is what this is about. And listen to Exodus. And God says, remember what happened is Moses sees the bush and goes across to it. And God says, well, you're on sacred ground. Take your shoes off, silly. And so he does. And then God says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people. I have heard them crying for help on account of their taskmasters. Yes, I am well aware of their sufferings, and I have come down to be with them. Yes, indeed, their cry for help has reached me. That's as far as I got. Then there's this next part. So now, God says, I'm sending you to Pharaoh. And I realized that we are being called to be a magnet, to be a faithful bush, to let God flame up in our lives so that our actions might ease the burdens that we have placed on people. Do you know that in the United States, 20% of the population is living so low at $20,000 a year or less? That people are working day in, day out for minimum wage and trying to raise their families? And do you know for minimum wage to have the same buying power as it did in 1970, it'd have to be about $12.50 an hour? It's currently $7.25. It's shocking. Our people, the burdens that are put on our people. Let me tell you about a young man I saw last week in New Jersey at a college there. I was speaking. We do this human bar graph thing. And all of a sudden, he realized that his family was economically in the lower 20%. And he raises his hand and he tells me that. And then he says, I never knew how hard my parents must have struggled until this moment. And then he started to cry, and he said, "My parents protected us from all that worry. They have given us gifts that I never knew. I am so grateful." Oh, my heavens, my heart. It's those burdens that have been placed on people. And then I've met this amazing young woman, Brittany, in Philadelphia, who, she's a freshman. It was so dear, because she came up and she asked for my autograph. And it was so sweet. And then she says, could she talk to me? And so then what happened is that when she talked to me after everybody left, she said, she was getting ready for college. She's the first one in her family to go to college. And she wanted President Obama, it was in September, she wanted President Obama to be reelected because she knew she wouldn't have Pell Grants if he wasn't. And then she said, just before school started, a few weeks before school started, in mid-July, her mom got arrested with her boyfriend, and Brittany was alone. And she tried to hold on to the apartment, but she couldn't, and ended up being evicted, and she was homeless until the dorm opened. And then she tells me all this stuff about how she took care of business, how she got herself to school, how she's doing all this. And then she tells me, and she had just gotten her first paper back from being in college, and she only got a B+. And with that, she bursts into tears. She had done all of this other, and with that, she burst into tears. So, of course, I hugged her and embraced her. And then I asked her if I could have her autograph, because it's her witness, it's her courage, it's her capacity, it's her ability to carry on in the face of these impossible obstacles. And then she said, well, could I write my mom's name down too? And so I carry them. I carry them. I can go on telling stories forever of all these people, but I have to tell you one more. And that is about Margaret, because this story is a more complex story. In Cincinnati, on the bus, the two, Margaret, let's see, how can I tell you? Okay, Jeannie and Lynn came from Margaret's memorial service. Margaret died because she lost her job of 20 years, and she lost her health care. And she didn't have any way to get screening. And her family was susceptible to colon cancer. So she ends up dying of colon cancer because she didn't have health care. This is wrong. And so these beautiful women, Margaret died at 56, and these wonderful women come from her memorial service. They bring me her picture. Of course, I'm such a schmaltz, I cry at everything. And so I just wrapped them around and hugged them, and we cried. And then they said that, yes, I could tell Margaret's story, because if the Affordable Care Act is fully implemented, no more Margarets need die. Low-income people can get coverage through Medicaid. We've got to make sure that Medicaid is fully expanded. It's a pro-life thing to do, for God's sakes. But what I realized is that Margaret is ministering to me, because she ministers to my resolution to stay faithful in the fight for healthcare reform. And I've gotten to give her a picture to a couple of governors who are working on this, and to a couple of state legislators who are working on this, so they too know Margaret and the reason for doing this work. Well, then I was up in Madison, Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago, and I got to meet Jeannie and Lynn, her two sisters, again. And you know what I discovered? They told me that because I've been telling Margaret's story, they have experienced a healing in their family, because their family could make no sense of her death, and they were really divided and felt guilty and just horrible that she died. And they didn't know how sick she was. But because of this, because of being able to tell you Margaret's story, their family's been healed with some kind of resolution